My name is Yolanda Spalding, and I was 31 this September. My mother sold my wedding out from under me. I found out from our mail carrier, who handed me a cream envelope with my own reception printed inside it, and another woman's name sitting under mine. It was a Thursday afternoon in July. I was standing in my own gravel driveway with dirt under my nails and $40 of zinnias wilting in the truck bed, reading an invitation to a party I had already paid for. My family had been arranging something for 3 weeks. Nobody thought to tell me. In my family, I am not a person you ask. I am a person you assume. And my mother has always called that assumption love. She has a whole speech about it. You will hear it. What she did with those 60 invitations was not the worst part of this story. What I did with the venue was, welcome back to Hidden Family Revenge. This is where we sit with the quiet ones, the ones who held everything together for years, until the day they stopped paying for it and nothing in that family was ever arranged the same way again. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. Bright Hollow Flower Farm is 11 acres on a 2-track off the highway outside Suttons Bay, Michigan. I bought it at 23 with a truck loan and a cosigner I paid off in 14 months. 3 hoop houses. 1 walk-in cooler that hums like a dying refrigerator, because that is what it used to be. My entire payroll is a 24-year-old named Cecily Bogard, who can strip a dahlia stem faster than I can and never once called in sick. On the shelf above the sink there is a coffee can with $6,800 in it, and the word tractor written on the lid in marker. That can is my retirement plan, my emergency fund, and my only indulgence. I sell to 2 florists in Traverse City, a grocery co-op, and about 30 brides a season. I am good at this. I built it out of 2 rows and a secondhand cooler and a back that clicks when it rains. And for 11 years, every wedding, funeral, baby shower, graduation, and church potluck in my family got flowers from me, and every one of them was free. I never wrote my own people an invoice, not one in 11 years, which turned out to matter more than anything else that happened. There is a way people like me get taken, and it does not look like being tricked. It looks like being useful. Out past the last hoop house that summer there was a short row of dahlias, dark red going to bronze at the edges, that I had been breeding for 4 seasons. Those were not for a florist or a co-op or a bride. I had timed them down to the week, and the week was the 14th of September. 2 weeks before the envelope, my mother had made a Sunday dinner nicer than the occasion called for. My parents live in Lake Leelanau, 14 minutes from my place if the road crew is not out. Marlene Spalding is 61, worked 29 years in hospital billing, and has never once raised her voice to get what she wants. She sets a table instead. That night there was a cloth on it and the good glasses, and my Aunt Wanda was there, and my cousin Kendra was there in a sweater she kept pulling over her hands. Everett and I brought a pie. We talked about the roof. We talked about somebody's knee. Then my mother put down the serving spoon and looked at me the way she looks at a form with a field left blank. "Share your wedding venue with your cousin," she said. "We'll split the 28,000. My father found something interesting about his fork. Kendra went red from the throat up and did not lift her head. I said the only thing I could get out, which was to ask what she meant by split, and my mother said Wanda would put in 3,000, and they would work the rest out later, the way families do. $28,000 was the whole budget for the wedding Everett and I had paid for ourselves, dollar by dollar, out of a flower farm and a timber framing business. It was 11 months of putting $300 a week into an account with the word barn written on the statement in my own handwriting. Wanda was already talking about how nice it would be for the girls to walk in together. Kendra said one thing that whole dinner, which was that she did not want anybody going to any trouble, and my mother put a hand on her arm and told her not to be silly. I looked around that table for one person who thought this was strange. What I noticed, and could not unnotice, was the tense she had used. She had not asked me for anything. She had told me what had already been decided. 60 invitations had gone in the mail on the Tuesday before that dinner. I learned this standing in my driveway with the cream envelope in my hand, 12 days later, doing the arithmetic backward. My mother had ordered them from a print shop in Traverse City. Kendra and Travis on the second line, in the same script as Everett and me, under a header that said, "Please join us." She had used my venue, my date, my start time, and my parents' address for the replies, so that every card came back to her kitchen and not to mine. By the time I opened mine, Travis Nunley's people had already booked 11 motel rooms in Traverse City for the 14th, non-refundable, because that is what you do when the rooms go fast in September. 2 of my aunts had bought outfits. Somebody's daughter had been asked to sing. The replies had started coming back the first week of July. My mother kept them in a shoebox on top of the refrigerator and read them out to my aunt on the phone in the evenings, the way other people watch a program. I called my mother from the driveway. I asked her who paid the print shop. She made a small sound, half a laugh, the sound of somebody being asked a question that has no manners in it. Then she said the shop had done her a favor on the price, and that I was welcome to look at the proofs if I did not trust her. That is the thing about a move like that. Legally, it was nothing. Not one line of my contract had changed. 60 families in 3 counties had already put the date on their refrigerators, and there is no clause in the world that reaches into a mailbox. I drove to Sundog Orchard Barn at 8 the next morning, which is 9 minutes from my farm, and I did not go home first. Rowena Dorsey runs the place. 58, gray braid, reading glasses on a shoestring, and the flat manner of a woman who has watched 400 families come apart over seating charts. She pulled the file before I finished the sentence. My name and Everett's. Both signatures, nobody else. A deposit of $9,400 paid from my business account in February. Your mother called me on the 9th, Rowena said. She wanted 2 more names added to the host line. She had told her no. She had emailed me the same afternoon, and that email had gone into the folder where I dump vendor traffic in high season, and I had not opened it for 11 days because I was cutting 600 stems a morning. I want to be clear that I had already built every fence I knew how to build. The contract went in my name and Everett's in February. I paid the deposit off the farm account so there would be no question whose money it was. I had written to Rowena in the spring and told her, in writing, that nothing on that agreement moved without my signature. She had followed that instruction exactly. Rowena looked at me over the glasses. Nobody changes this without your signature, she said. I sat in the truck in her gravel lot afterward and understood exactly where I stood. On paper, I had won completely. Not one document in that building said anything but my name, and I had lost anyway. Because a family does not run on paper, it runs on who already told who, and my mother had gotten a 2-week head start on the only ledger that mattered to them. So I drove out to Lake Leelanau to talk to my mother alone, which is a thing I had done maybe 4 times in my adult life. She poured coffee. She did not shout, because she has never had to. She sat down across from me at the same kitchen table where I made corsages for other people's daughters at 16, and she explained the world to me like I had come home from college with a strange idea. Whoever has, puts in, she said. That's all it is. Wanda did not have. I did. Kendra was getting married in a rented hall behind a bowling alley in Kingsley, and I had a barn with a view of 2 ridges, and to my mother those 2 facts sat in the same column, and one of them was simply too big. She told me about a woman at church whose son bought his sister a car. She told me what the aunts would say if one cousin got married behind a bowling alley and the other one got a hillside. Not one sentence of it was about me. It was about the shape of the family seen from outside it, which is the only place my mother has ever stood to look at us. I told her the barn was not spare capacity. I told her the $28,000 was every dollar Everett and I had, and that I had put 4 seasons into flowers for one specific Saturday. She listened the way you listen to weather. Then she reached over and patted the back of my hand and said the sentence I have heard in some form my entire life, in the gentlest voice she owns. Family doesn't send a bill. I said I understood. I drove back to the farm, past the church and the fruit stand and the turn where the pavement gives up, and somewhere on that road I did something I had never done in 31 years. I started adding it up. 2 nights later, my mother came to the farm with a folder of tablecloth swatches. She spread them on our kitchen table, sage and cream and a dusty rose, and started talking about how two brides in one room would need a shared palette so the pictures held together. Everett Brackett is 34. He built our packing shed and half the barns on this peninsula. He does not waste breath, and he has never in his life been talked into anything. He listened to the whole palette. He listened to the part about how the pictures would hold together. He asked one question, which was whether anybody had asked me, and my mother said that was not the point, and kept going. He let her get all the way through it. He looked at the swatches. He put down his cup and said, "No." He did not add anything to it. There was no speech, no reasons, no softening clause at the end for her to grab. That is a skill. I have watched grown people try to learn it in their 30s and never get it, and he came out of the box with it. My mother blinked twice, the way you do when a door you expected to swing turns out to be a wall. Then she smiled and said of course, and gathered the swatches, and told me the pie last Sunday had been dry. She went out onto our porch to make a call. Through the window I watched her stand at the rail with her back to the house, talking to my aunt for 11 minutes, and I knew the shape of what was being built out there before a word of it ever reached me. Inside of a day, I was not a woman who had said no. I was a woman whose fiancé would not let her help her own family. My brother Wes called to ask, carefully, whether Everett had a problem with our mother. My Aunt Wanda called Everett's mother in Charlevoix. Somebody made a group message that I was not in, and a cousin sent me a screenshot of it out of what she probably thought was kindness, and there I was in it, being discussed like a diagnosis. One of my uncles wrote that a man who will not let a woman help her own family is showing you something early. My mother did not put a single line in that thread. She did not have to. She made 2 phone calls from a porch rail and the rest of it built itself, the way a fire does once somebody stacks the kindling right. He isolates her. She used to be so easy. That is the part nobody warns you about. They do not attack the thing you said. They move the argument to a room where you are not standing, and then they hand you back a version of yourself with the reasonable parts taken out. By Friday, I caught myself drafting a compromise in my head so that Everett would stop being the villain in a story he had not agreed to be in. I actually wrote it on the back of a seed order. 2 ceremonies. One Saturday, I do her flowers for nothing. And I sat there with the pen in my hand and felt something cold go through me, because I recognized the handwriting. That was the same move I had been making since I was 20. Give them a little more, and maybe this time they stop. Kendra found me in the parking lot of the veterinary clinic where she works, on a Tuesday, still in scrubs with a paw print embroidered on the pocket. She is 26. She got as far as my name and then just stood there crying in the wind with her arms crossed. I told my mom not to, she said. I told her 100 times. I believed her, and I have never once stopped believing her. She bought her dress at a consignment place in Cadillac for $410 and had it taken in by a woman from her church. Travis Roove's houses. Between them, they had $6,000 and a lot of relatives in Ohio who were going to drive up regardless. She told me her mother had been telling people for a month that the venue was handled. She told me she found out about the invitations the same way I did, out of her own mailbox, which I had not known until that minute in that parking lot. Kendra told me she had offered to just do the courthouse, and my mother had told her that was defeatist. She said the word like it was somebody else's, because it was. That is how you can always tell in my family. Everybody talks in sentences that belong to my mother. Her sister June was in the passenger seat of the Corolla with the door hanging open, 22, one shoe up on the frame, not saying anything. I gave Kendra a paper towel from the truck and told her none of this was her fault. And it was not. When I pulled out, June was still watching me in the side mirror, and she held it a good deal longer than a person normally does. So I made the offer off the back of the seat order and I made it feeling generous, which should have been my first warning. 2 ceremonies on the 14th, 40 minutes apart. Kendra's flowers on me. Everything. Ceremony and tables and both bouquets. I called my mother and laid it out and she said, "Well, that's a start." Wednesday, the caterer needed to know about the second cake. Thursday, my mother wanted to know if Kendra's side could use the barn from 2 instead of 4, since Travis's grandmother tires easily. Friday, there was a question about whether the bar package could stretch. By the following Monday, Travis's guest list had grown by 41 people, and my mother explained that you cannot invite a man's mother without inviting her sisters. I said no to the bar package on a Tuesday, and by Thursday, my mother had asked Rowena about it directly, and Rowena, who does not know how my family works, told her it was up to whoever signed the contract, which put me back in the same room holding the same answer. I said no to a second cake. There was a second cake. Every single time I handed over one thing, the list got longer by 2. It is not that they were greedy. It is worse than that, and I want to be precise, because precision is the only thing I have left from that summer. They simply could not see a limit that I had not physically built. If I did not put up a fence, there was no fence. And I had spent 11 years teaching every person in that family that there was no fence. My Aunt Wanda called on a Sunday night when she knew I would be too tired to argue. She is 57, a dental assistant in Traverse City, and she has a voice like a warm dishcloth. She talked about her rent going up. She talked about Kendra deserving one nice day. Then she said it, in the exact words my mother uses, without knowing she was quoting anybody. Whoever has, puts in. I sat down on the step of the packing shed. I said, as evenly as I could, that in 2021 I had given her $6,000 toward Kendra's braces and the transmission, and another 6 over 2 years after that, and that nobody had ever mentioned it again. There was a pause on that line that I could have parked a truck in. Then my aunt said she did not think I was the kind of person who kept track, and she hung up, and I sat there listening to the cooler cycle on and off in the dark. I had never once mentioned that money. Not at Christmas, not when the truck it partly paid for went past me on the highway with her waving. The second I said it out loud, it stopped being help and turned into something I had done to her. If you have ever been the one everybody calls first, the one who can always figure it out, you already know the sound my aunt made before she hung up. Tell me in the comments what your family calls it when they ask you. Mine called it love, right up until I asked a question about it. Subscribe, because it gets a great deal worse before I do the only thing that ever actually worked. The row out past the last hoop house had a name. Ada's Bell, after my grandmother, Ada Renfrau, who died in 2019 at 84, and who taught me to pinch a dahlia at 18 inches while she smoked and criticized my technique. 4 seasons of breeding. You save the tubers from the one plant in 300 that does what you wanted, and then you wait a year, and then you do it again, and mostly you get nothing. But in the 4th year, I had 31 plants of a dark red that went bronze at the petal edge in cold nights, and there is no catalog on earth you can order that color from, because it did not exist until I made it. There were 200 tubers in the cellar under the packing shed, in sawdust, labeled in pencil, 4 generations of them. My grandmother would have hated the color. She thought anything darker than a peony was showing off, and she said so about most things, including me. I had pinched them on the 11th of June to land the bloom on the 2nd week of September. Cecily caught me out there one evening with a hose and said those flowers got better care than most children in this county, and she was not wrong. I had drawn the bouquet on the back of a fertilizer receipt in February and kept it in the truck visor. I had a wall calendar in the packing shed with the whole season on it, every crop, every cut date, written in pencil so I could argue with the weather. On the 14th of September, the square had my own name written in it, and nothing else. My father drove out alone on a Saturday to look at the irrigation pump, which had been making a noise since June. Lowell Spalding is 63. He fixed agricultural equipment for 31 years, and he is the kindest man I know, and I have spent a lot of my life waiting for that to mean something. He had the impeller housing off in 20 minutes. He told me the seal had been going since spring and that I should have called him in May. He said it the way he says everything, like a weather report about a county he does not live in. He wiped his hands on the rag from his back pocket and drank the coffee I brought him and looked out over the hoop houses and said the place looked good. Better every year. and I let myself believe that he had driven 14 minutes up the peninsula to tell me he was on my side. He set the cup on the bumper. "Just let your mother have this one," he said. Then he asked what time we were eating. I asked him if he thought it was fair. He said fair was a word people used right before they made trouble, and asked if there was more coffee. I stood there in my own yard holding a wrench I did not need, and understood something about that man that reorganized 31 years. He had never been neutral. He had just been quiet, in the direction she was already walking, for 42 years, and the whole time I had been reading his silence as a vote he was going to cast for me later. The change order came from the caterer on the 8th of August. Headcount up from 85 to 140, $9,600, due with the balance, 30 days before the event, no exceptions, and the woman on the phone was apologetic and completely immovable. 140 people at 135 a head, plus the second cake and the extra rentals. I asked whether the count could come back down. She said the kitchen orders protein against the signed number, and that the signed number had gone to Chicago on Monday. I asked where they got 140. They got it from my mother, who had called them directly with a revised list, and who was on that account as an authorized contact because I had put her there in February so she could deal with the linen order while I was at market. I did that. Nobody tricked me into it. That is the whole trap, and I want anybody listening to hear it clearly. Every door they walked through, I had unlocked myself, years earlier, being helpful. I signed the line of credit paperwork at the North Bay Credit Union branch in Suttons Bay on a Tuesday, $18,000 against next season, and then I sat in the truck in the lot, with the rain coming down on the cab roof and my hands on the wheel at 10 and 2, like I was about to merge onto something. I did not cry. I did the math instead, which is my version of the same activity. 18,000 at 9.25% is a tractor I do not buy, and a greenhouse I do not heat. Then I drove back down the highway to the farm, past the turn where the pavement gives up, and I went straight to the file cabinet in the packing shed and took down the green ledger off the top of it. It is a spiral-bound farm ledger with a green board cover, the kind they sell at the co-op for $11, and I have used the same one since the year I started. Every job I have ever done is in there in pencil. Somewhere around year 3, I had ruled my own column on the right-hand pages and printed family at the top of it, because I wanted to know what I was donating for tax purposes, and then never got around to asking anybody about tax purposes. There is something particular about your own handwriting from 6 years back. You cannot argue with it. It is not a memory. It is a receipt. Every line in that column reads the same, $0.00. In my handwriting, 160 sometimes. I sat at the packing table that night and I priced it out honestly, at the rate I charge a stranger, not a penny inflated. Family flowers and labor, 2015 through this summer, 41,800. My parents' furnace in 2021, 6,200. Half their roof, 4,500. Their property taxes, twice, 3,900. Wanda, 12,000. My brother's tuition and the down payment on his truck, 7,300. Kendra's engagement party and her shower, 2,700. My grandmother's funeral lunch, 5,000. I added it 4 times because I did not trust the first 3. Not one of those lines was a favor anybody asked me for twice. They asked once, and then it quietly became the arrangement, $83,400. I sat there with the yard light coming through the window and the cooler cycling behind me until the sky over the ridge went the color of a nickel, and Cecily knocked on the door at 6 and asked if we were cutting today. I said yes. I put the ledger in my bag. My mother must have felt the weather change because she called me over and got out something she had never shown me. A photograph, 3 by 5, in a drawer under the dish towels. She is 19 in it. She is standing on the steps of the county courthouse in a borrowed dress that does not fit her through the shoulders, next to my father with his hair combed wet, and her hands are empty. No bouquet, not one flower anywhere in the frame. She told me the dress belonged to her cousin and had to go back that same night. She told me her mother had needed that year's money for her brother's surgery, and that there had not been any conversation about it. There had just been a Tuesday and a courthouse, and a chicken dinner afterward at a place that is a laundromat now. She told me she handed her mother her paycheck from the time she was 16 until she was 24, and that she never once thought about not doing it. And she said that part with something close to pride. Nobody asked me either, she said. And for about 9 seconds I loved her so much I could not breathe, and I was ready to give her the barn, the date, the flowers, all of it. Then she put the photograph back in the drawer and closed the drawer and said, "So don't make a Saturday into a tragedy." That was the whole trick, and she did it in one motion, and she did not even know it was a trick. She had been handed a bill at 19 and she paid it, and 42 years later the only thing she could not forgive was somebody refusing to. I have gone back to that drawer in my head 100 times since. It is the only place in this entire story where I can actually see her. I photocopied 9 pages at the library in Sutton's Bay for $1.35, and the woman at the desk asked if I wanted them stapled. I said yes. I have never in my life been as sure of anything as I was walking out of that library with 9 stapled pages in a manila envelope. I have thought about that afternoon more than almost any other part of this. Everett came in from a job in Northport and found me at the kitchen table squaring the copies into a stack, and he stood in the doorway with his hat still on and asked me what I was hoping happened after. Not what I was going to say, what I thought would happen after. I told him I wanted her to see it one time. I wanted her to look at the number and understand what she had been spending. He did not argue with me. He is not built for it. He asked one thing, which was what I would do if she looked at the number and did not care. He just took the hat off and stood there long enough that the silence turned into an answer, and then he said he would come with me if I wanted, and I said no, this was mine. I want to be honest about where my head was that week, because I think it is the most common place a person can be. I still believed that the problem was that they did not know. I had 83,400 reasons in a green cover, and Sunday dinner was in 4 days. There were 9 of us at that table. My parents, Wanda, Kendra, and Travis, June, Wes, and Everett, who came anyway, and sat on my left and said nothing the entire evening. I waited until the plates were stacked. Then I put the green ledger on the table and opened it flat, and I read out the column, year by year, in the voice I use for a delivery invoice. Not loud. I did not editorialize. 15 weddings, 9 funerals, the furnace, the roof, the taxes, the tuition, the braces, the funeral lunch for the woman whose name is on the dahlias. Then the total. $83,400. For about 3 seconds nobody in that kitchen moved, and I thought, there it is. I have finally made myself legible to these people. My aunt started to cry. Wes looked at the salt shaker. Kendra pushed her chair back and left through the side door. Travis went after her and came back alone and stood by the door with his hands in his pockets, like a man at a funeral for somebody he did not know well, and my mother folded her napkin into a square and set it beside her plate, and said, "So you were keeping score the whole time." I told her that was not what it was. She said she had raised me better than a woman who writes down what she gives her own mother. Then she said it again. The gentle one? The one from the coffee table. And this time it came out with the skin off. Family doesn't send a bill. My father put his hand flat on the tablecloth, which is the most he has ever done in a room. Everybody at that table looked at me like I had brought a calculator to a funeral, and the terrible thing, the thing I did not see coming from any direction, was that the bigger the number got, the guiltier I looked. Wes called at 10:30 that night to tell me I had embarrassed our mother in her own kitchen, and there was real hurt in his voice. Which is what makes people like my brother so effective without ever meaning to be. He was not performing it. He believed it. 2 cousins texted the next day to ask if I was doing okay, in the tone you use on somebody who has started behaving strangely in public. One of my aunts sent a Bible verse. It was the one about love keeping no record of wrongs, which I thought was a reach, and I did not answer it. Nobody, Not one person in 3 counties asked whether the number was accurate. That is when I finally understood the language I had been trying to speak in. In that family, a number is not evidence. A number is an accusation, and the person holding it is automatically the one on trial, because the only people who count are people who are planning to stop. I had handed them the proof of 11 years, and it had converted, instantly and completely, into proof that I was cold. $83,400, and the only thing it ever bought me at that table was a reputation. That was the night I understood something I wish somebody had told me at 20. Being right does not get you out. If you are waiting for your family to look at the evidence and finally see you, I am sorry, and I am not going to lie to you about it. Stay with me anyway, because what worked was not proof. Comment, subscribe, and I will show you exactly what it cost me. My mother's next move took 4 days, and I did not see any of it happen. By Thursday, the story in circulation was that Yolanda was threatening to cancel the whole thing out of spite, and that poor Kendra was going to be the one who paid for it. It was not a lie exactly. It was the true facts stood up in a different order. 3 people called that week to ask how I was handling everything, which is a sentence you use on somebody you have already decided about. My mother never once said the word cancel to me directly. She said it to everybody else and let it come back around the long way. I did hold the contract. I could have called Rowena Dorsey on any morning that week and canceled, and the venue would have kept my deposit and released the date, and 140 people would have had nowhere to be. Travis's family had 11 motel rooms they could not get money back on. Kendra's dress was already cut down. She had had the sleeves taken off. You cannot put sleeves back on a dress. And here is what nobody tells you about finally getting leverage after 11 years of having none. It felt good. I stood in the cooler with my hand on a bucket of eucalyptus, and I ran the whole scene in my head, my mother's face in front of the entire family with no room and no explanation, and something in my chest went warm and level and pleased. That was the first moment in this story that actually scared me. Everett and I sat on the step of the packing shed that night with the door open and the moths going at the light. He did a thing I have never been able to do, which is add up a loss out loud without flinching at it. The deposit was gone either way. The balance was due either way. Whatever happened on the 14th, we were out the 28,000 and whatever the caterer had stacked on top of it, and no version of the next 4 weeks gave any of it back. He laid it out on the step with a carpenter's pencil on the back of a shingle wrapper, the way he prices a job. Money spent, money owed, what each choice actually bought. I said we could still get married. He said we were going to get married, that part had never been on the table. Then he asked whether I wanted a wedding, or whether I wanted to win, because we could not afford both. I did not answer. He took out his phone and turned it toward me. 14 bungalows on a strip of sand in the Ba Atoll, a place called Miru Lagoon, a photograph of a wooden walkway going out into water the color of a bottle. Nobody there knows a single one of us, he said. He did not offer it like a rescue, he offered it like a materials list. I looked at it for a long time. Then I got up and walked out past the hoop houses to the row of dahlias, and I stayed out there until the yard light shut itself off. It was 11 at night and I had a headlamp on and the buds were fat and just starting to crack color. I want to describe what happened out there accurately, because it is the whole thing, and it does not look like much from outside. A woman stood in a field for 40 minutes. I played the cancellation all the way to the end, the way you walk a fence line. I saw the phone call to Rowena. I saw 140 people and no barn. I saw my mother in the church parking lot trying to explain it. And I saw myself with the receipts, being right in front of everybody, finally. I could hear the version my aunts would tell about it for the next 20 years. I could see exactly where I would be standing while they told it. And I felt that warm level pleased feeling again, and this time I followed it back to where it came from. It came from the same place hers does. You do not get to keep that feeling and also call yourself a different kind of person. That is the whole test, and almost nobody passes it. And I very nearly did not. Control the pot, and make sure everyone can see who is holding it. If I canceled, I would win, and I would be my mother with a tidier ledger and a better reason. I would spend the rest of my life running the exact same machine with myself at the switch. I turned the lamp off and stood there in the dark with my hands in my pockets. I was not going to take the date back from them. I was going to give it away. Rowena Dorsey makes coffee strong enough to strip a deck. We sat at her kitchen table in the farmhouse behind the barn with the contract between us, and she went through it with a pen. There is an assignment clause in every venue agreement she writes. Standard, page 4. The contract can be transferred to another party with the owner's written consent and a $250 reissue fee. Balance due in full 30 days out, which was the 15th of August, 4 days away. New signatures from all 3 parties. Then she walked me through what the transfer did not do, which mattered more. It did not make me a host. It did not give me any say over the day. It did not leave a single line in that file with my name on it after the 14th. She asked me twice if the money was coming back to me in any form, and I said no. She asked me whether the incoming party knew, and I said, not yet. To hold the number down, I cut the bar package, the photographer, and the tent rental. $2,400, $1,900, $3,200. That took $7,500 off the $9,600 the caterer had added, and the last $2,100 came off the line of credit. $30,100 total for a Saturday I was not going to attend. Rowena took her glasses off and looked at me for a while. You sure? She said. She only asked once. That is the difference between a professional and a relative. I said I was, and then I asked her for a blank sheet of paper, because there was a line I wanted written into the assignment myself, in my own hand, where anybody could find it later. I signed on the 12th of August at 11 in the morning. The line I wrote at the bottom of the assignment, above my name, said, no reimbursement, no reversal, no repeat. Rowena initialed it. I asked her to keep a copy in the file where it would still be after she sells the place someday, and she said she would, and she has. The transfer went to Kendra Winstead and Travis Nunley, the 14th of September. The barn, the tables, the kitchen, the whole Saturday. I wired the balance the same afternoon, and the reissue fee came off my debit card like a lunch. Then I drove back to the farm and did the part I had been putting off for 2 days. Cecily was in the packing shed bunching status. I told her I had to take her down to 2 days a week from October through April, and that I would hold her spot, and that she should look for something else anyway because I would not respect her if she did not. She said, okay. She said it fast so I would not have to sit in it, which was a kindness I did not deserve at that moment. On her way out, she asked one question, which was whether the flowers were still going. I told her they were. She nodded like that settled something for her. Then I took the coffee can off the shelf above the sink, $6,800 in 10s and 20s, and I deposited it against the line of credit on Friday, and I threw the can out because I could not stand to look at it empty. There was one thing left to pay, and it was still out there in the field, coming into bloom right on schedule. I cut Ada's bell on Wednesday the 11th of September, starting at 4 in the morning, because that is when the stems are full and the field is cold and nobody is awake to talk to you. Headlamp, wet knees, the good snips, the ones with the orange handles that I do not let anybody else use. I cut them a shade tight, 3 days out from the day they were wanted, which is the outside edge of what a dahlia will forgive. And the only reason it works at all is a cooler held at 38 degrees. There is a right way to do this, and I did it the right way, which is its own kind of cruelty. Sharp blade, angle cut, straight into cold water in the dark, so the stem never quite learns it has been taken. 4 seasons, 31 plants. I did not count blooms, I counted buckets, and I got to 9, and then I got to 14, and then I quit keeping track of anything except the next stem. Around the 11th bucket, my hands started shaking and I sat down in the wet grass for a minute, and then I got up and kept going, because a flower does not care how you feel about it, and neither does a Saturday. Somewhere around 5:30, Cecily's headlights came up the 2-track. She had not been on the schedule and I had not asked her. She stood at the end of the row with her hands in her sleeves, looking at what I was doing to 4 years of my own work, and then she went to the shed and came back with the second pair of snips and started in the other end. Neither of us said anything about it. When the sun finally came up over the ridge, the row was bare stalks and a lot of leaves on the ground, and it looked like something that had been harvested, which it was, and also like something that had been taken, which it also was. At 6 that evening, I loaded the truck and drove the 9 minutes down Michigan 22 to the barn. Rowena held the sliding door while I carried 40 black buckets into the cool room at the back, and the whole building smelled like old apples and floor wax and, by the time I was done, like 100 pounds of dahlias. I chalked the plan on the blackboard by the kitchen door. Aisle, arch, 12 tables, which bucket fed which, the order to build them in, how tight to pack the low bowls so nobody has to look through them at their aunt. I wrote it out the way you write it for somebody who is not you and will not get to ask a question. Then I gave Rowena a craft envelope with the executed assignment inside, and the cooler keys, and Cecily's number, and told her Cecily was paid for Saturday morning and would set the tables. Kendra came in halfway through it. Somebody had called her. She stood in the doorway of that cool room, looking at more flowers than she had ever seen in one place in her life, and she opened her mouth, and nothing came out of it. And then she cried the way you cry when you are 26, and something is happening to you that you cannot pay back. I told her the arch faces east and to have Travis stand on the left. Then I asked Rowena for one thing, and one thing only. I asked her not to tell anybody whose flowers they were, or who had paid for what. Rowena said that was my business. I did not know that June Winstead was standing outside the barn door with a case of sparkling water on her hip, and that she had heard every word of it. My mother's car came up the drive 20 minutes later, and I have wondered ever since who called her, and I have never once asked. She came through the sliding door into a barn full of buckets and stopped, and I watched her face do the thing it does, which is convert a surprise into an arrangement. She walked the cool room. She touched a bloom with the back of one finger. And then she started organizing, out loud, the way she has organized every room she has ever walked into. Kendra should thank me publicly, before the toast, so people hear it. Wanda would need to be told to act surprised. I should wear the green, not the navy, because the navy washes me out in photographs. And she said, without any weight on it at all, that she had always known I would come around, that this was who I was underneath, and that she would tell everybody the flowers were from both of us. I let her get all the way to the end. That took about 4 minutes. Then I told her, in the voice I use for a delivery invoice, exactly what had happened. The contract for the 14th of September had been transferred, in writing, on the 12th of August. Kendra Winstead and Travis Nunley were the parties on it. The balance was paid in full. The flowers were a gift, and the gift was finished. And I was not going to be there. Not in the building, not in the parking lot, not in one photograph. She said that was ridiculous. She said it twice, and started to explain the seating. So I said the last part, which was the only part that ever mattered. I told her I would not be doing this again. Not this year, not next year, not for Wes, not for Wanda, not for her. She wanted to know what I wanted. That was the first thing that got loud. What do you want for it, Yolanda? What is it going to take? Tell me the number. She actually said, tell me the number, standing in a room I had just paid $30,000 for and handed away, and I understood that she was not being cruel. She was being fluent. It was the only language in the house I grew up in. Everything is a balance somewhere, and as long as there is a balance, the two of you are still connected. A gift ends. She had no idea what to do with a thing that ended. So she lost it, in an empty barn, with the cooler humming behind her. She told me I was punishing my family with kindness. She told me I had always been cold, that I had my grandmother's hands and none of her heart. She told me I would regret this at her funeral. I did not raise my voice one time. I have thought about why, and I think it is simply that I was already gone. When she ran out, I said the last thing I ever said to her in person, and I said it flat. And I meant every word of it as an ending and not a win. You're right. Family doesn't send a bill. So I didn't send one. Then I put the cooler keys in Rowena's hand and walked past my mother and out through the sliding door. I sat in the truck in that gravel lot for about 2 minutes before I could get it started. Not because of the money, and not because of the flowers, because I had just spent the last version of my mother that I was ever going to get. And I had spent it on purpose, and it was gone the way a season is gone. The paperwork had already been taken care of on the Tuesday. Everett and I had gone down to the county government center in Sutton's Bay, where the clerk in a county this size is allowed to marry people, and a woman named Pam in a cardigan did it in under 4 minutes between a dog license and a lunch break. There were 2 witnesses off the hallway. Pam asked if we wanted a picture and Everett said yes, which surprised me. The state of Michigan got its copy on a Tuesday morning, and that was fine, because the state of Michigan was never who the wedding was for. We flew out of Traverse City on Thursday at 6 in the morning. Detroit, then Doha, then Malay, then a seaplane with a pilot in bare feet. Somewhere over the Atlantic, I opened my phone to 2 messages from my mother. The first one was warm. She said she loved me and that we all say things. The second one came 90 minutes later and it was not warm, and the last line of it said that I had ruined a day that was not even mine anymore. I looked at it for a while with Everett asleep against the window. Then I typed back a single word, and I did not add anything to it, and I put the phone in the seat pocket and left it there. I was 31 years old, and it was the first time in my life I had ever managed to do the thing he did at my kitchen table over a stack of tablecloth swatches. It took me 22 hours of flying and 11 years of practice. In about a day and a half, on the other side of the world, it was going to be the 14th of September. We were married at 6:40 in the morning on the 15th of September, on a sandbar off Miru Lagoon in the Ba Atoll, which was 9:40 on the night of the 14th back home. There were 4 of us. Me, Everett, a soft-spoken man from the resort named Rashid, who does this on Sundays, and a young woman with a camera who kept apologizing for her English, which was better than mine. Rashid asked whether we wanted the resort's flowers, which they grow in pots behind the kitchen, and I told him, no thank you, I had already sent mine to the other side of the world. No aisle, no chairs, no tent, no bar, no seating chart, and nobody's aunt. I wore a linen dress I bought in Traverse City for $90 and carried nothing at all, and I thought about a 19-year-old girl on a courthouse step with her hands empty, and I could not tell you to this day whether what I felt was grief or something closer to company. Everett had cut a length of jute twine off a bundle in the packing shed and carried it in his shirt pocket for 11,000 miles. He tied it around my wrist. It smelled like the packing shed. That is the detail I kept. He said he would build whatever I wanted, wherever I wanted, for as long as I wanted it, and that was the entire vow, and it is still the truest thing anybody has ever said to me. The tide was going out. The sun came up out of the water like it was being handed to somebody. Back in the bungalow on the nightstand, my phone had been face down and silent since Thursday, and at 10:30 that morning it started to move across the wood. 10:30 where I was standing. 1:30 in the morning where she was. My mother had been home from the reception for about 20 minutes, and she was screaming before I finished saying hello. And here is the part I did not plan, and could not have planned, because I was on a sandbar with my hands empty when it happened. During the toasts, somebody at table 6 had asked the obvious question out loud. Where is Yolanda? And June Winstead, 22 years old, who works a coffee counter and had barely spoken to me in her life, answered it in front of 140 people. She told them her cousin had paid for the barn and the dinner and the tables. She told them the flowers were 4 years of Yolanda's own breeding, and Yolanda had cut every one of them herself. She told them Yolanda gave the whole day away and was not invited to it. And then she sat down. My mother did not call me because I ruined the wedding. She called me because the wedding had been beautiful and everyone at it had spent the second half of the evening looking at her. You made me look like a thief in front of my whole family, she said. I stood in the doorway of a bungalow with the water coming up over the boards, and I told her the truth, which was that I had asked Rowena to keep it quiet, and that nobody heard it from me. She said something about my grandmother. I said good night, Mom. Then I put the phone face down on the table and went out and swam until I could not feel my arms. 7 months later, Bright Hollow is smaller and it is mine. 2 hoop houses instead of 3, because I did not heat the far one through the winter. Cecily came back to 3 days a week in April and is looking at a horticulture program in Grand Rapids that I am writing her a letter for. There is a laminated sheet taped to the wall above the packing table now with my rates on it, and the last line says family rate, and under that line there is a blank space for a signature, and people sign it. And it turns out that is all it ever took. My mother tells a version of that September in which she was generous, and I walked out on my own family, and 2 of my aunts believe her. And I have decided that I can live inside that. My father calls on my birthday, and we talk about the weather. Wes called once. Kendra sends $200 on the first of every month with a note, and I cash it, because there is a rate now. And in March, June Winstead called me. She had told her mother no about handing over her tips, and she had used the family words to do it. I don't have, she said, so I'm not putting in. Then she laughed a little and said the thing I still think about. I didn't know I was allowed to do that. Out at the end of the field there are 3 plants coming up in a row, because Cecily saved tubers that August and never told me. I used to think love was the thing you kept paying for, and it took $30,000, 4 years of flowers, and my mother's voice at 1:30 in the morning to teach me that a gift you are not allowed to stop giving was never a gift at all. It was rent, and I had been paying it on a house I did not live in. That is my story. 60 invitations, 1 signature, and a field I cut down myself. If you are the one your family calls first, and you keep telling yourself next year will be different, go find out what this year actually cost you. Write it down once. You never have to show anybody. If this reached you, send it to the person you thought of. Comment, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.